Hey, fellow atheist, Matthew Chapman. You collaborated on the film Runaway Jury with Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman. You also wrote The Color of Night, starring Bruce Willis, and you wrote Consenting Adults, featuring Kevin Kline and Kevin Spacey. You've also directed a handful of independent films, but I first became aware of you from your on-screen commentary in a Nova documentary on the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial. What can you tell me about that?
Well, it was a really great drama. What had happened was that there were, I think it was 11 parents in a small town in Pennsylvania, Dover, Pennsylvania, fought back against a group of fundamentalists who had taken over the school board and were imposing or trying to impose intelligent design, creationism into the science classroom. They were asking for equal time for intelligent design, creationism, along with evolution, which of course is absurd because you can teach creationism in 30 seconds. You know, it happened 8,000 years ago, God did it, put it together, that's it. Whereas evolution, though I think it's a pretty simple theory to understand in its basic form, takes a little longer than that. So these great 11 parents, led by this woman, Tammy Kitzmiller, sued in federal court under the separation of church and state. And there then ensued a trial in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that was really a trial about the nature of life. You know, how did we get here? You know, how did we develop? What's guiding us? What isn't guiding us? It was just amazing. It was like an education. It was the most fun I had in years. And I wrote an article for Harper's Magazine, which they'd commissioned me to do. And then I wrote a book about it called 40 Days and 40 Nights.
Or more directly, let's see, it's 40 Days and 40 Nights, Darwin, Intelligent Design, God, OxyContin, and Other Oddities on Trial in Pennsylvania. It would seem that long titles are in your ancestry. I feel I should apologize for this because I'm sure hundreds of people have asked you this all your life, or at least since you moved to the United States. But speaking for myself, as one who lives in the Bible Belt, surrounded by creationists, and who has heard all the mindless, libelous, incendiary propaganda they spew, I am, of course, very curious. What sort of responses do you get from creationists upon discovering that you are the great-great-grandson of Charles Darwin?
Well, it ranges from sort of the affectionate and the bemused, like Michael Behe, who was the lead witness for the defendants in the Kitzmiller v. Dover case, an intelligent design proponent, writer of Darwin's Black Box. He was kind of delighted to meet me because even, at a certain level of that intelligent design thing, there is a kind of admiration for Darwin because they can't deny the good science. At the other end of the spectrum, you have I ran into a preacher down there who looked me in the eye and said, Darwin is responsible for the Holocaust, Stalin, Pol Pot, abortion, homosexuality, serial killers. He is the devil, more or less. If he's not the devil, he is the devil's spawn. And if you're connected to him, you're the devil's spawn, and you're certainly going to hell. And then he grinned, like they do. That was a little shocking. I wasn't aware of that level of animosity towards the world.
The complete lack of compunction, the lack of consideration for the injury they should have bestowed upon you. There does not seem to be much apology behind apologists. Not as much as there likely should be. Now, when you did the Kitzmiller versus Dover thing, was that also where you met Dr. Eugenie Scott and Dr. Barbara Forrest?
Yes, yeah. Eugenie Scott was there a lot. She's a great woman.
Oh, yeah, I met her once at TAM. I've had both of them on my show. That's how important I am.
And Barbara Forrest. Barbara Forrest's testimony in this thing was just devastating. She had done a kind of an archaeological examination of the development of this preposterous book that they were trying to get into the classroom called Of Pandas and People. And she had found old copies of the book where it had you could see it evolve from creationism to intelligent design, where they were using sort of creationist language, and then they sort of like pulled it out and put in ID, intelligent design. Now they're using some other phrase. So her testimony was devastating, and she was just, these are magnificent women, great women.
Yeah, it seems there's not a whole lot of honesty in the pursuers of the absolute truth either, which is a strange thing that came out in the trial. I think the judge even made that comment, that he was surprised at the number of people that would lie on behalf of their religious beliefs. Now, I read part of another book that you did. This was Trials of the Monkey, an accidental memoir. And I actually found it quite well written, what I've come across. I haven't finished the whole thing. It did get surprisingly good reviews compared to your previous work. They liked this quite a lot. And this was something that documented your trip back through the monkey trial in Dayton. I understand you didn't actually make their play. They have an annual reproduction of that, but you've had some other adventure or experience that was worth writing about, even though you'd missed the event that you'd gone to see. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, at that time, I was a very hard-working Hollywood screenwriter, and I was just writing one screenplay after another. And I was frankly getting a little sick of it, and I was offered this book. I mean, I got into a conversation with someone who was a publisher and with him I came up with this idea, which was of a Darwin descendant going beneath the Bible Belt to see how this town where this great trial had happened, how it had evolved in the 85 years since Scopes. And I thought it was a pretty funny idea, and I was just going to go down there, and they do a reenactment of the play every year. But and I thought I'd sort of go and see the play of, which is kind of, the play is supposed to be a sort of a dramatization of the court record of the trial. Mm-hmm. I later discovered that they'd cut out certain pivotal characters and twisted it to their advantage. And but I was so busy, I got the wrong weekend. I arrived late, and so my whole book fell apart in front of my face. I was appalled. It was terrible. My wife was Brazilian. I called her. I waited a day because I was so ashamed and embarrassed. And I said, "Look, darling, I missed the reenactment." And she laughed, and she used this Brazilian expression, which is stepping on the ball. She said, "Wow, you really stepped on the ball here," which is like a soccer expression. When you're playing soccer and you step on the ball and you just go flying. But it kind of didn't matter, because it sort of fed into a whole other book that I wrote about my childhood, and and I had a great time in this town. I hung out with all of these strange people in Tennessee, and who I still stay in contact with, and who I like, many of whom I disagree with completely. And, yeah, weird people. I mean, I went on this spelunking trip with some young Christians from the local Christian college, who I became very friendly with. They continued to email me and stay in touch, and yeah, it was a great trip.
Yeah, but you mentioned people that don't agree a whole lot. I mean, we're talking as atheists. I said fellow atheists at the beginning of this, and yet most atheists don't agree on a whole heck of a lot either, surprisingly. Although I don't know for sure, it seems to me that most atheists aren't necessarily scientists. Rather, they just don't have time or patience for all the thoughtless psychobabble associated with various religious claims that we have to listen to every day. My daughter, for example, says that whenever anybody tells her what great things God does, she smiles and nods and says, "Yes, he, she, it, or they do." And just lets them go about believing what they want to believe and not bother with it. We as activists, you would have to be out a little bit more out of the closet than that. And there's one thing that I'm personally concerned about and want to clarify, only on a personal level. This goes back to what I call the first foundational falsehood of creationism, the idea that accepting evolution necessarily requires the rejection of religion. I mean, here you are, a direct Darwinian descendant, and you're atheist. Some would say, well, of course. But as far as I know, Darwin himself never actually denied belief in a God, and despite your heritage, I suspect that your atheism may be cultural or philosophical rather than tied to your understanding or acceptance of science. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, in England, almost all schools teach religion. There's not the same separation of church and state. I actually don't think it's a bad idea because, you suffer enough religious bullshit in school, you're kind of liable to dump it. And but I was sort of fairly religious. I was very religious, actually, when I was young, and I wanted to be a saint, actually. And then I had, my uncle was a gay man living in England at that time, in a country where being gay was punishable by 30 years in prison, up to 30 years in prison. I don't think anybody ever had that, but it was a punishable crime. When I was about 5, he brought back a boyfriend who he's still with. They've been together for decades. And they were the most civilized, most decent people of my acquaintance as I was growing up. So when I got to be about 8 or 9, I began to wonder where all this homophobia and viciousness came from. And it was very obvious that it came from the Bible. Mm-hmm. So at that point I began to question, really the notion that anything that is fixed like that can be healthy. I don't think it is healthy at all. And so it started with that far more than with anything to do with Darwin or evolution. It was just simple. It seemed that the Bible contravened simple human decency, as anyone in their right mind could see was it made no sense. So that's where I started as an atheist.
Here in America, we've had very few heroes in movies and television who were seemingly atheists, though never unambiguously so. Perry Mason, for example, was nobody's fool. He was very matter-of-fact and obviously skeptical, with no time for unsupported assertions. In 2006, the movie Flyboys included a definite atheist in their list of peripheral good guys. At the moment, Hugh Laurie's character on House MD may be the only admittedly open atheist on American television. Were it not for British imports or Lisa Simpson, it seems that we would have no atheist characters at all. But I understand you've made a new movie in which Charlie Hunnam plays an unabashed and unapologetic atheist as the central character.
Yeah, this is true. And, it's if you look at, I think there are more similarities than are acknowledged between the gay rights movement and the atheist movement. Only if, from the point of view that they're ahead of us and they're doing better than us, and they're actually better liked than us, even though the prejudice is more out there too. And when you look at the gay rights movement and you see the various ways in which it pushed itself forward, I mean, there were reasonable arguments, there were outrageous arguments, there were parades, but maybe most important of all, there were many, many, many gay plays, gay movies, gay novels, and so on. And I think that if you compare the two movements, where we truly lag behind the gay rights movement is in the cultural artifacts that can help. And so I began to think that I could possibly use my Hollywood skills as a writer of thrillers, and into that framework put all of my feelings about being an atheist, how it's possible to be good as an atheist, how it's possible to sacrifice yourself if you're an atheist, and that it could be like the first of many movies that would have this viewpoint. Certainly there have been movies about religious cruelty, but they're all about a particular religion at a particular time, and it's not all religion, it's not there is a better alternative to religion. Yeah. It's just they'll take a little piece of it. My movie really does say there might well be a far better way to live than through superstition and dogma.
Yeah, you have to be careful when you say that you can be good as an atheist. And we had a public bus campaign where they had an advertisement on the side of the bus that says millions of people are good without God. And the religious communities here in Dallas-Fort Worth area actually hired another van to drive behind the main bus that had a counter slogan written on that, because there has to be some degree of censorship. There has to be the equal time, as if they haven't already had way more than equal time. I mean, the villain in your story. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to just quickly add to that. I mean, that notion of can one be good and an atheist? There's also that whole thing of there being no atheists in foxholes. And the most interesting thing to me about being at that conference in Iowa recently, in Des Moines, Iowa, there were 1,000 people there, and at a certain point, somebody said, we'd like all of the serving military people and non-serving military people to come up and stand on stage. And there were about that. There were over 100 of them. Like a tenth of that meeting was military people. I thought that was fascinating. I mean, these were soldiers still serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so there's anyway. Let's get back to science.
No, it's a very good point. Thank you. But as you were saying, as far as equal representation, the villain in your story is a deeply religious Christian, played by Patrick Wilson. Now, we've had lots of Christian bad guys, as you said, and people are okay with that as long as the good guy is a Christian too, which they usually are. But I'm sure that just because the hero in your film is an unbelieving infidel, that the Christian community will doubtless say that you're misrepresenting them, as if they hadn't been already adequately represented throughout media already. And I have to say that I find Wilson's character to be painfully familiar, especially living in Texas. He's one of those unreasonable, overly emotional, opinionated, bigoted, paranoid sensationalists who constitute the majority of voters in my home state, I'm sorry to say. You seem to have researched that character very well.
Well, I've met him, like you. I've met him several times in my life. I think the thing is, first of all, a lot of critics come from New York or LA, or they've lived there for a long time, and they've kind of gotten used to it. Secondly, it's not everybody who is interested in this and who goes around asking questions and finding out what people really think. Mm-hmm. Well, for both of my books, I did do that, and I did come across many people like that. And then, of course, you have someone like Pat Robertson, who has an extremely successful TV show. Well, it's not atheists who are watching him. It's a bunch of people who think the way he does. That will be, New Orleans. The designer Katrina was caused by homosexuality. It's just insane, and but not uncommon. And I actually think I'm pretty good to the character of the fundamentalist in my movie, because I do understand what it's like to suffer. I've had a lot of suffering in my life and lost people I've loved and had people die around me and been through some stuff myself. So I understand that when you're in a tough situation, you look for whatever solution you can find. And in his world, the church would certainly be the first place to go. And it just has some, has a little sting in its tail sometimes.
Yeah, when you talk about Pat Robertson and people of his ilk, one of the things that really bothers me about them is that I cannot get mainstream Christians to watch the broadcast channels that people like Pat Robertson are on. They won't watch those shows, and I have to say, okay, you're silent, you're supporting them, albeit unknowingly, through donations to whatever causes that then feed back to him. And he ends up acting as a spokesperson, presumably for you, because you're supporting him financially, but you're not actually listening to what he's saying, supposedly on your behalf. And it's like these people don't want to acknowledge people like Pat Robertson. And so the extremists end up heading everybody else. I try to get people to watch the Trinity Broadcast Channel. I try to get Christians to read the Bible. I beg with them, you really, please read this. Yeah. And it's a strange thing, to try to get them to read their own holy books and listen to what their own presumed religious leaders are saying. And while I don't know if I've seen Thunderfoot, for example, and a number of others have commented on your new movie as possibly being the Brokeback Mountain moment for atheism, and I don't know if it would be that, but it's certainly good to see something of our own perspective represented and not necessarily misrepresented in the movies that are done by the Christian community, like Left Behind and ridiculous trite like that. So,
well, I mean, if I may talk about the Brokeback Mountain thing that has gotten out there, my favorite comment in this has been from Greta Christina, who's this great atheist, gay activist in San Francisco, and she said, no, it's not the Brokeback Mountain for our movement. It's not as good of a movie as Brokeback Mountain, which I agree with. Matt Ang Lee is a complete genius. They had a lot of money and 5 times as much time. What she said is it's not, with the Brokeback Mountain, is like the culmination of loads of gay movies, loads of gay books, loads of gay plays, and it was this beautiful synthesis and final result. I think it's a beautiful, fantastic movie. What she says about The Ledge is on the contrary, The Ledge is the first of these movies, not the last. And that is in a way much more of a, that's a great compliment and a great thought for me and a great hope that there'll be more movies like this if this one does well. May I go back to that thing you were saying about Pat Robertson and...
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, it was a thing. I met Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I don't know if you know her. Who wrote
yes.
And she was saying that when the death threats began to come in on her after Theo Van Gogh made his film and got killed for it, the film that depicted a Muslim woman with writing on her, that when the death threats began to come in on her, she was disappointed most of all, not by the radical Islamic side of things, which you expect that kind of behavior. What she was disappointed in was that the quote-unquote moderate Muslims didn't violently attack those who were suggesting that this woman who had already been genitally mutilated should now be beheaded. That's what she found most upsetting. And I think I heard Salman Rushdie say the same thing when there was a fatwa on him, that if you are Muslim and you do consider yourself a moderate, then surely the first thing you do when someone says, oh, let's behead this woman, is you violently attack your own religion and say this is completely unacceptable. And they didn't rise up in her support, and so, or in Salman Rushdie's. So that is the great disgrace of a religion, I think, and revealing too.
Yeah. The Christian counterpart of that is when Pat Robertson said that killing homosexuals will prevent earthquakes. And I remember watching the Trinity Broadcast Network, and I'm beginning to wonder if it's only atheists that watch the Trinity Broadcast Network, where he said in, I think it was 1994, that killing homosexuals would prevent earthquakes, and because the United States, as he put it, was the only country that allowed homosexuals to live. And that's why we were being visited by these terrible calamities. And why does the Christian community not rise up and depose this guy? You have a TV channel? Not anymore. We want we want somebody a little more sane to represent our demographic, but we don't see that happening.
No, I mean, he really is out there. I mean, I don't know what, but he's out there, but he's making a lot of money, which means a lot of people are watching and sending in their hard-earned dollars.
Yeah, somebody sent a cartoon of a newspaper that had gone through time, a newspaper from 10 years from now, and it says, unrest in the Middle East as the central headline. And then there's a subcaption that says, Pat Robertson says something crazy. A timeless newspaper, good for all ages. Greta Christina, you said gave a somewhat passive critique of your movie. I would like to mention that I talked to Ken Lukinnen of American Atheists yesterday. He said he's seen your film and that it's great. So a little balance.
No, Greta Christina liked it. I mean, she was actually very complimentary about it, and she just mentioned this, which I think I don't know where this Brokeback Mountain thing came from. It wasn't directly from me. But
I wouldn't know.
no, she gave it a really good review. Her review is at the top of the list in my ledgemovie.com, which is our website, because it was a lovely review and very, very sweet, and in particular there is in honor of the movie is dedicated to my uncle and his boyfriend, but she was particularly moved by a relationship in the movie, which is between Charlie Hunnam and his roommate, who is gay. Mm-hmm. And I was particularly gratified by that, because it's the only really functional relationship in the movie, and there's a great deal of kind of friendship and respect, and she wrote a beautiful review, and I love this woman, and she's great.
Well, I can't really say anything about the Brokeback Mountain comparison. I must confess I haven't seen Brokeback Mountain. I'm waiting for the remake with Jessica Alba and Halle Berry. I'm all about that one.
It's coming.
Anyway, Mr. Chapman, it's been a pleasure. I hope to have this video up on my channel. I'd like to see your movie promoted on Ferengula. I see it's already being promoted on the Richard Dawkins Foundation. I'd like to get a lot of people in the atheist community to give you some support. And as I said, I will be in New York when your film opens, and I hope to run into you there.
Well, thank you very much. It is important to have this movie come out, and the better it does in America, the better it will do worldwide. And it's been sold to every country on earth, just about. I mean, from China, Russia, the Middle East, believe it or not, Indonesia. I mean, huge swaths of this planet are going to be seeing this movie, and more will see it if it's done well in America. So I hope you'll support it, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you, sir.